Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 3307 broadens the Tennessee Farm Animal Research Facility Protection Act, which is its law today, and it expands it to include some mining and logging and quarries, and it stiffens the penalties on some of these Eco Terrorism acts. Well, first let me try to explain Eco Terrorism. I'm surprised that you haven't heard of it, because take one group, the PETA group. According to the FBI, they're the #1 domestic terrorist group in America. They are considered eco-terrorists. Eco-terrorists are left-wing eco-greenies. You know, they don't have a leader. They're a leaderless terrorism group. They just kind of spring up sporadically. They do things like turn research animals out on the interstate, turn farm animals loose from semis in the middle of the town. They drive spikes in logs to go into the sawmills so it'll knock the teeth out of the sawmills. They put sugar in firefighting equipment in the national forest, and just it's a different type of terrorism. They don't have Osama bin Laden leading them. They're kind of a leaderless type but they do a lot of damage, mainly in the Northwest and the Northeast, but they're spreading across the country. This bill also stiffens the penalties to try to discourage them from coming into our national forests or state parks and our research facilities at
do we have
universities.
These people in Tennessee?
Pardon?
Do we have these type people in Tennessee?
We do, and so far, most of what they've done has been directed at the forestry department.
What have they done?
Well, they put sugar in bulldozers and national forest and things like that. So far we've been lucky. We haven't had any research animals turn loose. Like I say, right now it's happening mainly in the Northwest, where there seem to be more wackos. Luckily we don't have as many wackos yet, but we're gaining.
They're sort of like the fire ants. They're headed this way.
They're headed this way.
Let me kind of start from back to front on some of the comments you just made. You mentioned that there are, I believe the term you used was more wackos in the Northwest. Can you be more specific?
Wacko.
Well, yeah, first of all, I guess define the term wacko, and then let's talk about the geographical restriction you talked about. What is a wacko?
Well, a wacko is someone who doesn't go by the law. He's so concerned and so emotionally attached to an idea that he disregards the law and acts on emotion instead of good sense and good law.
Mm-hmm. And you don't know.
That's an East Tennessee term I wouldn't expect you to understand.
You don't know anyone that would fit that characterization as being a wacko,
very few
emotional issues.
No wackos in this committee and very few in the legislature.
I would assert that there are no members in this room sitting on the committee that would qualify as wackos, although I'll leave the rest of that up to your judgment.
I've checked you all out. There are no wackos in this committee.
Thank you. I won't make a comment about the sponsor, but in terms of the Northwest, where are you talking? Northwest Tennessee? Are you talking
the great Northwest? Montana, Oregon, Washington, the land of the spotted owl, and the land of the freeman, and the land of the Unabomber. Some of those.
Was the Unabomber an eco-terrorist?
The Unabomber was an eco-terrorist. He was a wacko.
He was a wacko, but was he an eco-terrorist?
Well, I guess if you're killing people in the name of the environment, that would be the ultimate eco-terrorist.
Is that what he was doing?
He was sending bombs to judges that didn't agree with the environment and blowing up judges. I would consider that
really
eco-terrorist. Yeah.
Do you have any proof of that? Do you have any?
Well, he's spending time in the federal pen now. They pretty well proved it.
But do you have any documentation?
Is that what he was? On him.
Is that what he was convicted of, as being an eco-terrorist?
Right.
So there's a federal offense on eco-terrorism?
Well, there's a federal offense on killing judges.
Well, aren't there many federal and state offenses already on the books governing the conduct that you're talking about?
Well, as a matter of fact, there is.
Trespassing, vandalism.
We have a law on the books now, the Tennessee Farm Animal
Reckless endangerment.
If I may. Tennessee Farm Animal Research and Facilities Protection Act is on the books today in Tennessee. This bill expands it to include forestry and mining. Not a very big, major bill in the big scheme of things. I have a way of making little bills seem hard, I guess.
Well, and you were talking about putting sugar in the gas tanks of bulldozers in national forests and things of that nature. Aren't national forests typically governed by the federal government?
Well,
Isn't that why they're called
I'm not sure that it's
national forests?
limited to the national forest. I mean, it's we have state forests. We have private woodland. Most of our forests in Tennessee are private woodland, and these taxes have not only been in national forests, but also been in private property too.
And
Tennessee is the #1 hardwood producing state in the nation right now, and so we have people that don't want us to harvest these trees.
And have there been specific incidents of eco-terrorism, such as you described, occurring in Tennessee, or are we just
Yes,
trying
according to the Forest Department, they have.
or are we just trying to put a border around our state to keep the? I think the other term you used was left-wing eco-greenies.
Right. Now, I may have
How does
explaining that
what's
for
the
you.
difference between a left-wing eco-greenie and a wacko?
A WACO is an acronym that stands for Left Wing Eco Greenie.
Well, you may be using a different alphabet than I am. If I were to describe an acronym for left-wing eco-greenie, it would be something like LWEG, not wacko. And you also mentioned a group, PETA. Or is PETA, are they the ones that are putting sugar in gas tanks?
No, they do a lot of things. They one of the most hideous things they've done is stretch piano wires over jumps. So when fox hunters jump their horse over, it would catch the rider about the neck. They do all kinds. PETA's done all kinds of things. They're the ones that the FBI says the #1 domestic terrorist group in America.
And wouldn't you also consider what the Unabomber was doing more of a, and I'll use this term, right-wing wacko or right-wing extremist, to the extent he disagreed with the policies and practices of the federal government and thought that they had essentially united too much with the policies of the United Nations? Do you know very much about the Unabomber, aside from being able to assert
I know,
that he was a wacko?
Now you're going to let me talk now?
Well, if you would let me finish my question
Well, go
before
ahead.
you would try to interrupt me and answer, I'd appreciate it. I finished my question. I'm ready for your response.
Most of what I've heard about the Unabomber has been on the news and on Rush Limbaugh. He used to read out Al Gore's Earth in the Balance, and then he would read the Unabomber's manifesto and let people guess which was which. Most people couldn't tell whether it was Al Gore's Earth in the Balance or the Unabomber's environmental manifesto, so I just assumed he was a left-winger. I don't know. When you're around back, it doesn't matter how you got there. If you went to the right or you went to the left. When you get around back, you're a wacko.
Let me ask you about another group out there. Since we're talking about essentially domestic terrorists, how do you feel about the Ku Klux Klan?
I don't feel about them, never think about them.
Well, would you consider them to be a terrorist organization?
What's that got to do with this bill? Mr. Chairman, I think we're straying a little here.
I'm trying to get an understanding, Mr. Sponsor, about your use of the term eco-terrorism and wacko and left-wing eco-greenies, and you're describing them as domestic terrorist organization. You've already said that PETA, do you know what PETA stands for?
People eating tasty animals.
Okay. And you have already equated then some group called People Eating Tasty Animals to Osama bin Laden, and equating them to as much a threat to this country as Osama bin Laden. And I'm just curious to know where we draw the line in terms of trying to define and restrict and regulate and sanction those groups within this country that are committing acts of terrorism. And I ask you very specifically, you've mentioned groups that don't seem to have anything to do with this bill. I'm asking you about another one. Do you consider the Ku Klux Klan to be a terrorist organization?
Oh, I'd say they definitely are.
Would you consider them to be one of the most dangerous terrorist organizations in this country?
Without doubt. But would it make you feel better if I called these terrorists a right-wing eco-terrorist wackos? Could that promote my bill? Maybe they're just right-wing whether they're right or left. When you start tearing up other people's equipment and you turn farm animals out, research animals out, you know, you're a terrorist. Whether you're a right-wing or left-wing makes very little difference to me.
Well, Mr. Chairman, based upon the sponsor's agreement, I would propose Amendment Number 1 to the bill, which is to replace anywhere in the bill it cited eco-terrorism or eco-terrorists, that we insert the phrase right-wing eco-terrorists. That'd be my amendment.